Megan Foster had 800 flight hours when Alaska Regional Flight 2847 lost both engines over the Brooks Range. The captain was unconscious and bleeding. 87 passengers screamed behind her. She had 12 minutes to glide a 20-ton aircraft through mountains she couldn't see. Zero visibility. Dead instruments. What happened next would rewrite aviation history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 hours earlier, Megan had arrived at Fairbanks International Airport before dawn, her breath fogging in air, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. She walked the exterior of the de Havilland Dash 8 twice, checking every surface, every panel, every access door. The pre-flight inspection called for one walk-around. She always did too. Captain Frank Morrison showed up 20 minutes later with a coffee in each hand, and that look veterans gave rookies. Part amusement, part mild annoyance. He was 53, had logged 14,000 flight hours, and made it clear he didn't need a first officer who second-guessed everything. "You checked the oil already?" Morrison asked, handing her a coffee. "Oil's good. Tire pressure, good. Fuel quantity verified against the load sheet." Megan pulled out her knee board, reviewing numbers she'd already memorized. Morrison took a long sip of coffee. "Weather brief says mountain wave activity along the route. Moderate turbulence possible. Should be smooth once we're at altitude." Megan had read the same brief. Twice. The low-pressure system moving through the Brooks Range would create standing waves downwind of the peaks. Invisible air currents that could slam an aircraft up or down 1,000 feet in seconds. Manageable in daylight. Trickier at night. "What about the icing forecast?" she asked. "Light to moderate below 10,000. We'll be at 31,000. No factor." Morrison headed toward the aircraft stairs. "Let's get the cockpit set up. Passengers board in 20. Inside the cockpit, Megan methodically worked through the setup. Battery on, APU start, hydraulic systems check. She ran her finger down the checklist even though she knew every item cold. Morrison settled into the left seat, the captain's seat, and powered up his displays. "Engine oil temp on number 2 looks a little high," Megan said, watching the gauges climb during the startup sequence. Morrison glanced at the reading. "These Dash 8s always run hot. Pratt & Whitney engines. Bulletproof, but they like their operating temps warm. Nothing to worry about." Megan made a note on her knee board anyway. The temperature was within limits technically, but it sat at the high end of the green arc, closer to yellow than she liked. The lead flight attendant, Dana Richards, stuck her head into the cockpit. "We've got 87 souls on board today, 3 lap children. Weather looks nasty out there. Should I expect a bumpy ride?" "Smooth sailing once we climb out," Morrison said. "Tell the folks to enjoy the view of the Brooks Range at sunrise. Should be spectacular." Dana caught Megan's eye and smiled. They'd flown together a dozen times. "You good, Meg?" "Always." Megan returned the smile, but her attention was already back on the engine gauges. The oil temperature on number 2 had climbed another 5 degrees during ground operations. Morrison keyed the radio. "Fairbanks ground, Alaska Regional 2847, ready to taxi with information alpha." The tower cleared them to runway 01 left. Morrison released the parking brake and advanced the throttles. The Dash 8 lurched forward, propellers biting cold air, beginning the taxi that would end with Megan fighting for her life 12 minutes after both engines quit. The Dash 8 lifted off runway 01 left at 7:03 local time, climbing into darkness that would start giving way to dawn in another hour. Megan had the controls. Morrison always let her fly the departures, said it kept her sharp, kept her from getting complacent in the right seat. She banked left, following the departure procedure that would take them northeast toward the Brooks Range. The lights of Fairbanks dropped away below. Ahead, there was nothing but black. "Alaska Regional 2847, contact Anchorage Center on 132.45, the tower said. Megan switched frequencies. "Anchorage Center, Alaska Regional 2847, climbing through 4,000 for 31,000. Alaska Regional 2847, radar contact, climb and maintain flight level 310. The aircraft punched through a thin cloud layer at 8,000 feet. Light turbulence bumped them around. Nothing serious. Megan trimmed the aircraft, adjusting for the climb power setting. The engines hummed steadily, propellers synchronized, everything running smooth. Except the oil temperature on engine number 2 had climbed another 3 degrees. "Captain, number 2 oil temp is now 220 degrees. That's getting close to the caution range." Morrison leaned over to check the gauge. Still in the green, probably just the cold ambient air affecting the sensor reading. These things are sensitive to temperature differentials. He settled back in his seat. "Keep an eye on it, but I wouldn't worry unless it hits the yellow arc." Megan wanted to push back, wanted to say they should consider returning to Fairbanks, have maintenance check it on the ground. But Morrison had 14,000 hours. She had 800. The math of experience made her defer. They climbed through 18,000 feet. The turbulence smoothed out. Morrison was right about that at least. The ride at altitude would be glass smooth. "Your airplane," Megan said, following procedure as they approached their cruise altitude. "I'll get us set up for cruise." Morrison took the controls. Megan ran through the cruise checklist, adjusting fuel flow, verifying pressurization, checking all systems. Everything looked normal except that damn oil temperature. It had stabilized at 222 degrees. Still technically in the green arc, but barely. The sky ahead began to lighten. Not true sunrise yet, but that pre-dawn glow that turned the world from black to deep blue. Below them, the Brooks Range started to take shape, an endless series of peaks and valleys covered in snow. Not a single light or road or any sign of human presence for 100 miles in any direction. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Morrison said. 30 years flying Alaska, I never get tired of this view." Megan nodded. It was beautiful, also completely unforgiving. The survival rate for aircraft that went down in the Brooks Range in winter was roughly 20%. The cold would kill you faster than any injuries from a crash. She checked the oil temperature again. 224 degrees now. "Captain, it's still climbing." Morrison glanced at the gauge, then back out the windscreen at the mountains emerging from darkness below. "Noted in the logbook. We'll have maintenance look at it in Anchorage. For now, we're fine." They leveled at 31,000 feet at exactly 7:35. The oil pressure gauge on engine number 2 began to flicker. The oil pressure needle on engine number 2 dropped from 40 psi to 35 in the span of 3 seconds. Then it bounced back to 38, flickered down to 32, back to 36. Megan's hand moved to the gauge, tapping it gently. Sometimes a sticky needle would settle with a light tap. The needle dropped to 28 psi and stayed there. "Captain, we've got a problem. Number 2 oil pressure is down to 28 and falling." Morrison's casual demeanor vanished. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the engine instruments. The oil temperature had spiked to 240 degrees, firmly in the yellow caution range now. As they watched, the pressure dropped to 22 psi. "That's not a sensor." Morrison's voice was flat, professional. "We're losing oil." The minimum oil pressure for continued operation was 18 psi. They were 4 psi above the red line and dropping fast. Megan's training kicked in automatically. She was already reaching for the engine failure checklist before Morrison called for it. "Engine failure checklist," Morrison said. "Let's get ahead of this." Megan pulled the laminated card from its holder. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Single-engine operations were routine. Uncomfortable, but routine. The Dash 8 could fly and land safely on one engine. They'd practiced this scenario a dozen times in the simulator. The oil pressure hit 15 psi. "Shutting down number 2, Morrison announced. His hand moved through the shutdown sequence with practiced precision. Fuel lever to cut off, propeller to feather. Fire handle pulled. The right engine's propeller blades rotated to align with the airflow, minimizing drag. The aircraft yawed slightly to the right as the left engine provided all the thrust. Morrison compensated with rudder pressure, trimming the aircraft to fly straight. The cockpit got noticeably quieter, with only one engine running. Anchorage Center, Alaska Regional 2847, declaring an emergency. We've shut down the number 2 engine due to oil pressure loss. Requesting vectors to Bettles Airport for emergency landing. Alaska Regional 2847, roger your emergency. Turn left heading 270. Bettles is 70 miles at your 11 o'clock. Descend and maintain 10,000. Morrison began the descent, reducing power on the remaining left engine. The aircraft could maintain altitude on one engine, but descending took the pressure off the good engine and gave them options if anything else went wrong. Megan pulled out the approach plates for Bettles, a small airport with a single runway, but it was certified for commercial operations and had emergency equipment. 20 minutes. They'd be on the ground in 20 minutes. Get Dana up here, Morrison said. Brief her on the situation. I want the cabin ready for emergency landing. Megan reached for the intercom, but before she could press the button, the oil pressure gauge on engine number 1, the good engine, the only engine keeping them in the air, began to flicker. No, not possible. The needle dropped from 42 psi to 38. Bounced to 35. Dropped to 30. Captain, I see it. Morrison's knuckles were white on the yoke. What the hell is happening? The oil temperature on engine number 1 was climbing. 60 seconds ago, it had been normal. Now it was already at 200 degrees and rising fast, following the exact same pattern as engine number 2. Megan felt her stomach drop. It's the same failure, both engines. Morrison's face had gone pale. They were at 24,000 feet, 70 miles from the nearest airport, flying over the most remote mountain range in North America. And in roughly 90 seconds, they were going to lose their last engine. Engine number 1's oil pressure hit 12 psi. The low oil pressure warning light illuminated red, accompanied by a steady chime. Morrison silenced the warning, but the light stayed on. Anchorage Center, Alaska Regional 2847, emergency update. Oil pressure loss on engine number 1. Both engines compromised. We may lose total power. There was a pause. 2847, say intentions. Morrison looked at Megan. She saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. What's our glide ratio? 12-1 with both props feathered. The math ran in her head. We're at 24,000 feet. That gives us 48 nautical miles of glide range. Bettles is 70 miles out. We won't make it. Morrison's hands moved across the controls. What else is within range? Megan pulled up the chart. Mountains, valleys, wilderness. There's nothing, Captain. No airports, no roads, nothing. The oil pressure on engine 1 dropped to 8 psi. The temperature gauge pegged at the top of the red arc. Any second now, the engine would seize. We need flat ground, Morrison said. A frozen lake, a valley floor, anything. Megan pressed her face to the window. Dawn light revealed an endless maze of peaks and ridges. She spotted a valley running northwest, maybe 2 miles wide, winding between mountains. Valley at our 10 o'clock, running northwest. If we follow it down, there might be lowlands at the far end. Morrison banked left. The aircraft shuddered. Engine number 1 was dying. The oil pressure needle sat on 0. Alaska Regional 2847, attempting forced landing in the Brooks Range, estimating total power loss within 2 minutes. Activating emergency locator beacon. Morrison pulled the ELT activation handle. A radio beacon in the tail began transmitting their position on emergency frequencies. The engine number 1 fire warning light illuminated. Morrison pulled the fire handle, cutting fuel and shutting down the engine before it could catch fire. The propeller windmilled briefly, then Morrison feathered it. Both propellers now aligned with the wind. Both engines silent. The only sound was the rush of air over the fuselage and Megan's breathing inside her oxygen mask. They were gliding, 24,000 feet above the most unforgiving terrain in North America, with 87 passengers behind them and absolutely no power. The instant both engines quit, cabin pressure began to drop. Without engine-driven compressors, the aircraft couldn't maintain pressure. Megan watched the cabin altitude gauge climb. 8,000 feet, 9,000, 10,000. At 14,000 feet, cabin altitude, the passenger oxygen mask would deploy automatically. I've got the aircraft, wow, Morrison said. You handle everything else. Megan keyed the radio. Anchorage Center, Alaska Regional 2847. We've lost both engines. Total power loss. Gliding through 22,000. Roger 2847. Emergency services notified. Air National Guard launching rescue from Mielson. Godspeed. The passenger oxygen mask deployed with mechanical thumps. Megan heard screaming through the cockpit door. 87 people suddenly realizing their aircraft had no engines. She grabbed the PA microphone. Her voice needed to be calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Foster. We have shut down both engines as a precaution, and we're making an emergency descent. Pull down the oxygen masks and breathe normally. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for emergency landing." The intercom buzzed. Dana's voice was tight. "Flight deck, what's our situation? Both engines failed. We're gliding. Maybe 10 minutes until touchdown. Get everyone in brace position." "Are we going to make it?" Megan looked at the mountains rising on both sides. The valley was narrowing. She could see rock faces close enough to count the striations. "Do your job, Dana. I'll do mine." She turned to the instruments. With no engine generators, they were running on battery power. The batteries would last maybe 20 minutes. She needed to prioritize what information they'd need for landing. "What's our best glide speed?" Morrison asked. 120 knots gives maximum range. But in these valleys, we might need more speed for maneuverability. "Set 140. I need response authority if I have to turn." Megan adjusted the pitch trim. The airspeed increased to 140 knots. Their descent rate increased too, now dropping at 1,800 feet per minute. The math was brutal. 20,000 feet. Valley floor at 5,000 feet elevation. 15,000 feet to work with. At 1,800 feet per minute, they had 8 minutes before they hit the ground. 8 minutes to find a place to land a 20-ton aircraft with no power. Morrison banked right, following a bend in the valley. The wingtip passed within 200 feet of a granite cliff. A cloud layer was forming ahead, drawn up the valley by morning thermals. "We're going into IMC," Morrison said. Instrument meteorological conditions. Flying blind. Megan's stomach clenched. They were about to lose visual reference in a narrow mountain valley while gliding a powerless aircraft. The clouds swallowed them. One moment Megan could see rock faces and slopes. The next, nothing but white fog. "Attitude indicator," Morrison snapped. Megan's eyes locked on the artificial horizon. "Level. No weight. Right wing dropping 2 degrees. Morrison corrected. Flying on instruments alone, he had to trust the gauges even when his inner ear screamed something different. Spatial disorientation killed pilots in clouds. Altitude 18,000. Descent rate 2,000 feet per minute. Too fast. Morrison pulled back on the yoke, trading airspeed for altitude. The descent rate slowed to 1,500 feet per minute, but their airspeed bled to 120 knots, right at stall speed. "We're too slow," Megan said. "I know." Morrison pushed the nose down. The airspeed climbed to 140, but descent rate increased. The terrain warning began to chime. "Terrain! Terrain! Pull up!" Megan silenced it. The last thing they needed was an automated voice telling them to pull up when they were trying to descend into a valley. "Radio altimeter shows 1,200 feet above ground," Megan called out. Morrison held the heading steady. They were committed now. Turning back wasn't an option. They descended too far. Forward was the only way. The radio altimeter suddenly jumped to 800 feet. "Ridge ahead!" Megan shouted. Morrison pulled back hard. The aircraft ballooned upward. The stall warning horn blared. They were right at the edge where wings would stop producing lift. The radio altimeter climbed. 900 feet, 1,000, 1,100. They'd cleared the ridge. Morrison pushed the nose down, accelerating out of the stall region. His face was white. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Then a loud crack echoed through the fuselage. The aircraft shook violently. Megan's head snapped forward and slammed into the instrument panel. Pain exploded behind her eyes. Blood streamed from a cut above her eyebrow. "Rapid decompression," Morrison gasped. "Structural failure." The windscreen was covered in blood droplets. Morrison's blood. He'd been thrown against the side window. His oxygen mask was ripped partially off. He fumbled with it, movements uncoordinated. Hypoxia. Morrison had maybe 15 seconds of useful consciousness before he'd pass out. Megan reached across and yanked Morrison's oxygen mask back into place, pulling the straps tight. But his eyes were already glazing. His hands slipped from the yoke. The aircraft began to bank right, diving toward the invisible mountains below. Megan grabbed the yoke with both hands. The aircraft was in a 40-degree bank, nose dropping fast. She had maybe 3 seconds before they entered an unrecoverable dive. She hauled back on the controls, fighting the weight of the aircraft. No hydraulics meant every input required pure muscle. Her arms screamed. The yoke felt like it was carved from concrete. The artificial horizon showed 30 degrees nose down. 25. 20. The airspeed was climbing past 160 knots. Too fast. At this rate, they'd overspeed the airframe or slam into a mountain. "Captain!" she shouted. Morrison's head lolled against the headrest. His eyes were half closed. Hypoxia had him. She was alone. 15 degrees nose down. Megan pulled harder. Her shoulders burned. The aircraft slowly began to respond, the nose inching upward. 10 degrees. 5. Level. She'd stopped the dive, but now they were flying straight into clouds with no idea what was ahead. The radio altimeter fluctuated wildly. 900 feet, 700, 1,000, 600. The terrain was a maze of ridges and valleys invisible in the white void. Blood ran into her left eye from the cut on her forehead. She wiped it away with her sleeve. Her head pounded. Concussion, probably. She couldn't think about that now. "Altitude 16,000, she said aloud, talking to herself because there was no one else. "Descent rate 1,800 feet per minute. Airspeed 140. Still in the valley, I think." Morrison groaned beside her. His oxygen mask was secure, but his hands hadn't returned to the controls. He was breathing but not conscious enough to fly. Megan's eyes darted between instruments. Attitude indicator to maintain wings level, altimeter to track their descent, radio altimeter to avoid hitting terrain, airspeed to stay out of a stall. It was like juggling knives while falling off a cliff. The clouds began to thin. Patches of gray appeared, then glimpses of white below. Snow. The valley floor was getting closer. 13,000 feet, she muttered. The valley floor was probably around 5,000. That meant 8,000 feet of altitude remaining. 4 minutes until impact at current descent rate. She needed to find flat ground. A lake. A plateau. Anything smooth enough to put down a 20-ton aircraft without killing everyone aboard. The clouds broke completely. Megan saw the valley opening ahead, widening into what looked like a basin. And there, 2 miles ahead, a white expanse that could only be one thing: a frozen lake. This story takes time to craft. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Megan grabbed the yoke with both hands. The aircraft was in a 40-degree bank, nose dropping fast. She had maybe 3 seconds before they entered an unrecoverable dive. She hauled back on the controls, fighting the weight of the aircraft. No hydraulics meant every input required pure muscle. Her arms screamed. The yoke felt like it was carved from concrete. The artificial horizon showed 30 degrees nose down. 25. 20. The airspeed was climbing past 160 knots. Too fast. At this rate, they'd overspeed the airframe or slam into a mountain. "Captain!" she shouted. Morrison's head lolled against the headrest. His eyes were half closed. Hypoxia had him. She was alone. 15 degrees nose down. Megan pulled harder. Her shoulders burned. The aircraft slowly began to respond, the nose inching upward. 10 degrees. 5. Level. She'd stopped the dive, but now they were flying straight into clouds with no idea what was ahead. The radio altimeter fluctuated wildly. 900 feet, 700, 1,000, 600. The terrain was a maze of ridges and valleys, invisible in the white void. Blood ran into her left eye from the cut on her forehead. She wiped it away with her sleeve. Her head pounded. Concussion, probably. She couldn't think about that now. "Altitude 16,000, she said aloud. Descent rate 1,800 feet per minute. Airspeed 140. Morrison groaned beside her. His oxygen mask was secure, but his hands hadn't returned to the controls. He was breathing but not conscious enough to fly. Megan's eyes darted between instruments. Attitude indicator to maintain wings level. Altimeter to track descent. Radio altimeter to avoid terrain. Airspeed to stay out of a stall. The clouds began to thin. Patches of gray appeared, then glimpses of white below. Snow. The valley floor was getting closer. 13,000 feet. The valley floor was probably around 5,000. That meant 8,000 feet of altitude remaining. 4 minutes until impact. She needed to find flat ground, a lake, a plateau, anything smooth enough to put down a 20-ton aircraft without killing everyone aboard. The clouds broke completely. Megan saw the valley opening ahead, widening into a basin. And there, 2 miles ahead, a white expanse that could only be one thing, a frozen lake. It was maybe 1.5 miles long, half a mile wide. Smaller than she'd like, but it would have to work. Nothing else was visible for miles. Just mountains, trees, and frozen wilderness. She aimed for it, adjusting her descent angle. Too steep and they'd hit too hard. Too shallow and they'd overshoot the lake entirely. "Dana," she said into the intercom. 30 seconds. Brace position now." "We're ready," Dana's voice came back. "Bring us home, Megan." Megan's hands were shaking on the yoke. 800 flight hours. That's all she had. And here she was, about to dead stick land a turboprop in the Alaskan wilderness with no captain, no power, and no second chances. The lake was filling her windscreen now. She could see cracks in the ice, dark patches that might be thin spots. No time to be picky. This was happening whether she was ready or not. Megan ran through the emergency landing checklist from memory. There was no time to pull out the actual card. Fuel. She reached up and shut off all fuel valves. The last thing they needed was a post-crash fire. The fuel tanks held maybe 2,000 pounds of jet fuel, enough to turn the aircraft into a fireball if anything sparked. Landing gear. Her hand hovered over the gear lever. Wheels down or wheels up. Wheels down gave them brakes, but if the gear dug into snow or hit a crack, they'd cartwheel. The aircraft would disintegrate. Wheels up meant a belly landing. The fuselage would slide across the ice, distributing impact force. Safer for the passengers. She made the decision. Gear up, belly landing. 10,000 feet. Morrison didn't respond. His breathing was regular, but he was still unconscious. Blood covered the left side of his face. The lake was 1 mile away. Megan began dumping fuel, pulling the dump handles. Jet fuel streamed from the wings. Every pound of weight she could shed would reduce impact force. 8,000 feet, 1 mile out. She pulled the yoke back slightly, adjusting her glide path. Too high still. She needed to lose altitude. Without power, she had no flaps for drag. Megan banked left, then right, turning to burn off altitude. 6,000 feet, half mile out. The aircraft was lined up now, pointed straight at the lake's near end. She had one shot at this. No go around. No second approach. Her airspeed was 120 knots. Fast for a landing. Normally they'd touch down at 95, but without power she needed extra speed to maintain control. 5,200 feet, 300 feet above the lake. 20 seconds to impact. Megan's throat was tight. Her hands were white-knuckled on the yoke. Blood dripped from her chin. Behind her, the passengers had gone silent. 87 people trusting her to save their lives. She pulled the yoke back, raising the nose. The tail would hit first, absorbing the initial impact. Then the belly would contact the ice. 50 feet. The ice filled her entire field of vision. She could see every crack, every snowdrift. 30 feet. 20. Megan held her breath. 10 feet. 5 feet. The tail struck ice. The impact threw Megan forward against her harness. The tail section crumpled, absorbing energy. Metal shrieked. The rear pressure bulkhead buckled. Then the belly hit. The aircraft skipped once, bounced 10 feet back into the air, then slammed down again. They were sliding now, hydroplaning across the frozen surface at 90 knots. The noise was deafening, aluminum scraping across ice. Megan fought the yoke, trying to keep the wings level. The aircraft wanted to spin. If they started rotating, they'd roll. The wings would dig in. They'd cartwheel and everyone would die. "Stay straight," she muttered. "Stay straight." The airspeed bled off. 80 knots. 70. The ice was rough, covered in snow that acted like sandpaper against the aluminum belly. 60 knots. The right wing dipped. Something had caught. Megan threw her weight onto the left side of the yoke. The aircraft shuddered. Metal screeched. But the wing came back up. 50 knots. 40. They were going to make it. Then the nose gear well caught on something solid. A chunk of ice. a frozen log. The nose pitched down violently. Megan's head slammed into the glare shield. Her vision went white with pain. The aircraft's tail came up, the whole fuselage tilting forward. For a horrible moment, they balanced there, nose down, tail in the air. This was it. They were going to nose over. The cockpit would be crushed. Then the tail crashed back down. The aircraft slammed flat against the ice with a boom like an explosion. Every window on the right side shattered. Freezing air blasted into the cabin. The floor buckled. Luggage bins tore free, but they were sliding again. Still moving forward but decelerating rapidly. 30 knots, 20, 10. The aircraft rotated slightly to the left, sliding sideways. 5 knots, 3. They stopped. The silence was absolute. Megan could hear her own breathing, could hear Morrison's breathing beside her. She keyed the intercom. "Dana, cabin crew report." Nothing. "Dana." Still nothing. She released her harness and tried to stand. Her legs buckled. Pain shot through her ribs. She grabbed the back of her seat and pulled herself up. Morrison groaned. His eyes fluttered open. "What happened?" "We're down, Captain. We're on the ground." "Did we?" "I don't know yet, but I'm about to find out." She opened the door and looked into the passenger cabin. The cabin looked like a war zone. Oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling. Luggage was scattered everywhere. The emergency lighting cast everything in dim red. But people were moving. People were alive. Dana was already on her feet, blood streaming from her forehead. She was helping an elderly man out of his seat. Another flight attendant was checking passengers row by row. "Everyone stay seated," Dana shouted. A woman in row 12 was screaming. Her arm hung at an unnatural angle. Broken. A man 2 rows back was hunched over, clutching his chest. A teenager near the emergency exit had blood pouring from his nose, but was helping the person next to him. Megan counted heads quickly. She could see everyone. Nobody was missing. Nobody was obviously dead. "Dana!" Megan called out. "Evacuation now. Get everyone off this aircraft. We're on a frozen lake, and I don't know if the ice will hold." Dana looked up, her face pale but determined. "Emergency exits." Megan scanned the cabin. The main exit door was jammed. The overwing exits looked operational. The rear exit was partially blocked, but might work. "Overwing exits and rear. Main doors blocked. Go now." Dana moved to the nearest overwing exit and yanked the handle. The door fell away, landing on the ice outside. Freezing air howled into the cabin. Passengers gasped, but Dana was already directing them toward the opening. "Move! Everyone move! Leave your belongings!" The rear exit was open now. People were filing out both ends, sliding down onto the ice. Some were limping, some were being carried. But they were getting out. Megan turned back to the cockpit. Morrison was on his feet now, one hand pressed against the bulkhead. His face was gray, but his eyes were focused. "Captain, can you walk?" "I can manage. What's our situation?" 87 passengers evacuating now. Multiple injuries, but everyone's alive. We're on a frozen lake in the middle of the Brooks Range. Temperature is -20. No shelter. No help for hours. Morrison nodded slowly. "Then we better get these people warm before they freeze to death." The last passenger stepped off the aircraft onto the ice. Megan did a final sweep of the cabin, checking every row, every seat. Empty. Everyone was out. She grabbed an emergency kit from the overhead compartment, first aid supplies, thermal blankets, flares, and stumbled toward the overwing exit. Her ribs screamed with each breath. Definitely broken. Outside, the cold hit her like a physical blow. -20 felt like knives cutting through her thin uniform shirt. She'd left her coat in the cockpit. No time to go back. 92 people stood clustered on the ice 30 yards from the aircraft. Some were wrapped in coats. Most weren't. Already people were shivering violently. Hypothermia would set in fast. Dana was organizing triage. She lined up the injured on the ice. 7 people who couldn't walk, another dozen with visible wounds. Marcus was using his belt as a tourniquet on a man whose leg was bleeding badly. "How bad?" Megan asked, dropping beside Dana. 3 critical. Woman with broken arm going into shock. That man, she pointed, possible heart attack. and the kid over there took a luggage bin to the head, unconscious but breathing. Megan opened the first aid kit. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, thermal blankets. Not nearly enough for 92 people. She pulled out her handheld emergency radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Alaska Regional Flight 2847. We are down on a frozen lake approximately 40 miles north of Bettles. 92 souls on board, all survived. Multiple injuries. Immediate rescue required. Temperature -20 and falling. Over. Static crackled. Then a voice broke through. Alaska Regional 2847. This is Rescue Coordination Center Elmendorf. We have your position from your ELT. Air National Guard launching rescue helicopters now. Estimated time to your location is 2 hours. Weather conditions deteriorating. Can you confirm all personnel are mobile? 2 hours. People would start dying in less than that. Negative on mobile. 7 passengers, critical, unable to walk. Entire group exposed to elements with minimal cold weather gear. We need immediate evacuation. Copy that, 2847. Be advised, weather system moving into the Brooks Range. Visibility dropping. If conditions deteriorate, we may not be able to reach you until weather clears. Megan's stomach dropped. How long if weather scrubs the rescue? Could be 6 to 12 hours, possibly longer. She looked at the people around her. A mother holding 2 small children, an elderly couple clinging to each other, their lips already turning blue. The teenager with the head injury, still unconscious. 12 hours. They wouldn't last. We need shelter, Morrison said. He'd made his way off the aircraft, blood still crusting on his face. We can't stay exposed on this lake. Megan scanned the shoreline. Trees, dense forest, maybe 200 yards away. If they could get everyone to the trees, they could build fires, create windbreaks. Can everyone walk that far? She asked Dana. The critical ones can't. We'll have to carry them. Then that's what we do. Megan raised her voice. Listen up. Rescue is coming, but it's going to be at least 2 hours. We can't stay here. We're moving to the trees. Everyone who can walk helps someone who can't. We move together. Nobody gets left behind. A man in the back shouted, "What about the aircraft? Shouldn't we stay with it?" The ELT is transmitting our position. They know where we are. But if we stay here, people will freeze. We're moving, now. They organized into groups, the able-bodied paired with the injured. 2 men fashioned a stretcher from aircraft seat cushions and belts. The elderly couple walked together, supported by passengers on each side. The mother carried one child while another passenger carried the second. Megan took point, breaking trail through the snow toward the tree line. Each step sent pain through her ribs, but she kept moving. Morrison brought up the rear. The snow was ankle-deep in places, deeper where wind had piled it. People stumbled, some fell. Others helped them up. The 200 yards felt like 2 miles. Behind her, a man collapsed, just dropped face first into the snow. Morrison was there immediately. The man's face was white, his lips blue. Severe hypothermia already setting in. "Get him up!" Morrison shouted. "Keep him moving." 2 passengers grabbed the man under his arms and dragged him forward. His feet left trails in the snow. They reached the tree line after 15 minutes. The forest was dense spruce and pine. The trees blocked the wind immediately. The temperature was still brutal, but at least the cutting wind was gone. "Set the injured down here," Megan ordered. "Everyone else, we need to build fires. Now." People scattered, gathering deadwood. One passenger pulled out a lighter. Another man produced a pocket knife. They had tools. Not many, but enough. Dana was working on the most critical patients. The woman with the broken arm was going into shock. The man with chest pains was barely responsive. The teenager hadn't woken up. "We need to get these people warm," Dana said. "They won't make it 2 hours like this." Megan looked around. They had trees for shelter and fuel for fire. But 92 people needed warmth, and they had maybe a dozen thermal blankets. "Marcus, take 5 people back to the aircraft. Strip every blanket, every coat, every piece of fabric you can find. Seat covers, carpet, anything. Bring it all here." Marcus nodded and headed back at a run, 5 volunteers following. Morrison was working on starting the first fire. His hands shook from cold, but he managed to get kindling arranged. The passenger with the lighter held the flame to dry pine needles. Nothing. The needles were too cold. He tried again. On the fourth attempt, a tiny wisp of smoke appeared, then a small flame. Morrison fed it carefully. The fire grew. People crowded around immediately. Too many people. The fire couldn't produce enough heat for everyone. "Second fire!" Megan called out. "We need multiple fires. Spread out." Within 20 minutes, they had 4 fires going. People rotated through, warming themselves before giving someone else a turn. It was organized chaos, but it was working. Megan finally allowed herself to stop. She leaned against a tree, every muscle screaming. Her ribs felt like they were on fire. Her feet had no feeling. Morrison appeared beside her, holding out a torn piece of aircraft carpet. "Wrap this around your feet." She took it, wrapping the fabric around her shoes. The insulation helped immediately. She could feel blood starting to flow back into her toes. The pain was excruciating, but pain meant tissue was still alive. 2 hours, Morrison said quietly. "You think we can hold out?" Megan looked at the group huddled around the fires, at the children crying, at the injured lying on the frozen ground, at Dana working frantically with almost no medical supplies. "We have to," Marcus returned with the scavenging team carrying armfuls of fabric. Seat covers, blankets, even the curtain that separated first class from economy. They distributed everything immediately. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. The woman with the broken arm had stabilized, but the man with chest pains was getting worse. His breathing was shallow. His skin had a gray pallor. "He needs real medical attention," Dana said. "I think he's having a heart attack." Megan checked her radio. "Rescue coordination. This is Alaska Regional 2847. What's your ETA? We have a passenger with suspected cardiac event. Critical condition." "Static." Then, 2847, rescue helicopters are 30 minutes out. Weather is marginal, but they're pushing through. 30 minutes. The man might not have 30 minutes. Dana was doing chest compressions now. The man had lost consciousness. She counted compressions, gave rescue breaths, counted again. People gathered around, watching in silence. The sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the lake, distant at first, then growing louder. 2 Alaska Air National Guard Pave Hawk helicopters appeared overhead. One descended toward the lake. The other hovered above the forest, lowering a rescue basket through the trees. Paramedics came down first. They went straight to Dana and the man in cardiac arrest. Within seconds, they had an IV in his arm, oxygen mask on his face, defibrillator pads on his chest. "Clear!" one paramedic shouted. The man's body jerked. The paramedic checked for a pulse, shook his head, charged again. "Clear!" Another shock. This time the paramedic nodded. "We've got sinus rhythm. He's back." They strapped the man into a rescue basket. The helicopter winched him up. The second critical patient went next, then the third. Megan watched in a daze. Her body was shutting down now that rescue had arrived. She felt herself sinking to the ground. A paramedic appeared in front of her. "Ma'am, are you injured?" "Broken ribs, maybe concussion. I'm fine." "You're going up next." "No, get the passengers first. All of them." The paramedic looked at Morrison, who nodded. "She's right. Passengers first, then crew." It took another hour to evacuate everyone. The children went first, then the elderly, then everyone else. Finally, only Megan, Morrison, Dana, and Marcus remained. "Your turn," the paramedic said. This time she didn't argue. She let them strap her into the basket, let them winch her up. Below she could see the crash site, the wrecked aircraft, the fire still burning, the tracks in the snow where 92 people had walked to safety. She'd done it. Against impossible odds, she'd brought them all home alive. Megan woke up in Providence, Alaska Medical Center 3 days later. The last thing she remembered was being loaded into the helicopter. Everything after that was blank. Her body felt like it had been run over by a truck. Her ribs were wrapped tight in bandages. An IV ran into her left arm. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her torso. "Easy." A nurse appeared at her bedside, pressing her back down. "You've got 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and frostbite on your feet. You're not going anywhere for a while." The passengers, Megan croaked. Her throat was raw. Are they all alive? 92 people walked away from that crash. Everyone survived. The nurse smiled. You're a hero. It's all over the news. Megan closed her eyes. Relief flooded through her. She hadn't killed anyone. Despite everything, she hadn't killed anyone. Captain Morrison, 2 rooms down, skull fracture and hypothermia, but he'll be fine. He's been asking about you every day. The door opened and a man in a suit entered carrying a briefcase. He introduced himself as Gregory Walsh from the National Transportation Safety Board. Behind him came another investigator named Sandra Chen. First Officer Foster, we need to ask you some questions about the incident. Are you up for that? Megan nodded. Every accident required an investigation. Every decision she'd made would be analyzed. Walsh pulled out a digital recorder. Walk me through the sequence of events from first indication of trouble. Megan took a deep breath and started talking. She described the oil temperature warnings Morrison had dismissed, the engine failures, the decision to dump fuel, gear up versus gear down, the glide through the mountain valley with zero visibility, taking control when Morrison lost consciousness. Walsh listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back. You made the decision to keep the landing gear retracted for a belly landing. Why? The ice surface was unknown. Deploying gear risked the wheels catching and causing the aircraft to cartwheel. A belly landing distributed the impact force across the fuselage structure. It was safer for the passengers. And the decision to fly into instrument meteorological conditions through a mountain valley. We were in an unpowered glide. Climbing wasn't an option. The valley was the only terrain that trended downward toward potential landing sites. The choice was fly blind through the valley or die. Chen spoke. First Officer Foster, you had 800 flight hours. How did you feel about handling this situation with your level of experience? How did I feel? Megan stared at her. I felt terrified. I felt completely unqualified. I felt certain we were all going to die. But I was the only person in position to do something about it. So I did what I was trained to do. I flew the aircraft. Walsh closed his notebook. For what it's worth, preliminary analysis suggests you made optimal decisions. The flight data recorder shows your glide path through those mountains was within 2 degrees of the mathematically ideal trajectory. Any deviation and you would have hit terrain. That's not luck. That's skill. It didn't feel like skill. It felt like desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. Walsh stood. We'll have more questions as the investigation progresses, but for now, rest. You saved 91 lives. Don't forget that. After they left, Megan lay in the quiet hospital room, staring at the ceiling. 2 degrees. That's all that had separated survival from total catastrophe. Morrison appeared in her doorway the next morning, walking with a cane, his head wrapped in bandages. He looked 10 years older than before the crash. You look terrible, Megan said. You should see yourself. Morrison eased into the chair beside her bed. They tell me you took over when I was out, flew the whole approach and landing yourself. You were hypoxic. Someone had to. 800 hours and you dead-sticked a -8 onto a frozen lake in zero visibility. Morrison shook his head. I've got 14,000 hours and I'm not sure I could have done what you did. You would have listened to your instincts about those oil temperatures. We wouldn't have been in that situation. Morrison was quiet. You're right. I dismissed your concerns. I let my experience make me complacent. That's on me. The NTSB says it was contaminated oil, maintenance issue, nothing either of us could have prevented. Maybe, but you flagged the problem early. If I'd listened, we could have turned back to Fairbanks. We'd have landed safely. We both made it out, she said. Everyone made it out. That's what matters. The door opened. A woman walked in carrying a young boy, maybe 7 years old. Behind them came an elderly couple Megan recognized from the evacuation. I'm sorry to intrude, the woman said. I'm Sarah Chen. This is my son David. We were in seats 8A and 8B. The boy held out a handmade card. On the front, he'd drawn an airplane with a stick figure in the cockpit. The words, "Thank you for saving my mom," were written in careful handwriting. We just wanted you to know, Sarah said, her voice breaking, that because of you, David still has his mother. I get to watch him grow up. The elderly couple stepped forward. Henry and Martha Dobson, married 53 years. Our granddaughter's getting married next month. Because of you, we'll be there. More people appeared in the doorway. The teenager who'd been unconscious. The man who'd gone into cardiac arrest on the ice. Dana carrying a stack of cards and letters. There are 92 stories like ours, Henry said. 92 families who got their loved ones back. Megan looked at all of them. At the faces she'd seen screaming in terror, then huddled around fires, now healthy and whole. These people were alive. That was real. That mattered. Thank you, she said quietly, for trusting me to bring you home. Sarah smiled through tears. You didn't just bring us home. You showed us what courage looks like. 6 months later, Megan walked into the flight operations building at Fairbanks International Airport. Her ribs had healed. The frostbite had required minor surgery, but she'd kept all her toes. The concussion symptoms had faded. Physically, she was cleared to fly again. Mentally was another question. The nightmares had been bad at first, waking up in cold sweats, convinced she was falling. They came less frequently now, but they still came. The NTSB final report had cleared her of any wrongdoing. The contaminated oil had been traced to a bad batch delivered to maintenance. Her actions were cited as exemplary airmanship under extreme duress. Alaska Regional Airlines had offered her a promotion. Captain position. At 26 years old, she'd be one of the youngest captains in the company's history, but Megan wasn't sure she wanted it. Every time she thought about climbing into a cockpit, her hands started shaking. Morrison was already in operations when she arrived. He'd returned to flying 3 months ago on limited duty. The crash had changed him, made him more careful, more humble. Big day, he said. First flight back. Just a training flight, empty aircraft, baby steps. How are you feeling? Terrified. What if I freeze up? Then the instructor takes over and you try again tomorrow. You've been through something 99% of pilots will never experience. Give yourself time. The instructor pilot was Rachel Kim, a veteran with 25 years of experience. She met Megan at a small Cessna 172. No pressure today, Rachel said. We go up, fly some patterns, see how it feels. If you want to come down, we come down. This is about rebuilding confidence. Megan nodded. Her hands were shaking as she did the pre-flight inspection. Every switch, every gauge reminded her of that morning. The oil temperature warnings, the cascading failures, the silence when both engines quit. She climbed into the left seat, put her hands on the yoke. They were trembling. Megan, Rachel's voice was calm. Look at me. You're safe. Nothing bad is going to happen today. You can't promise that. I can promise that whatever happens, you have the skills to handle it. You proved that over the Brooks Range. Megan took a deep breath. Her hands were still shaking, but she started the engine anyway. The familiar vibration, the sound of the propeller, it all came flooding back. Not the terror, the love, the reason she'd wanted to fly. She taxied to the runway, got clearance, advanced the throttle. The Cessna accelerated. She pulled back on the yoke. The wheels left the ground. They were flying. Megan felt something release in her chest. A knot of tension she'd been carrying for 6 months suddenly loosened. She was flying again, not to save anyone's life, just because she loved it. They flew for an hour. Pattern work, turns, climbs, descents. Rachel didn't have to take the controls once. By the time they landed, Megan's hands weren't shaking anymore. How do you feel? Rachel asked. Like I remember why I do this. Megan shut down the engine and sat in the quiet cockpit. She thought about Flight 2847, about the 92 people who trusted her, about Morrison, about Dana, about the frozen lake and the fires. She'd survived the impossible, brought everyone home, and now she had a choice. Let that experience define her with fear, or let it make her stronger. Schedule me, she said. Captain training. I'm ready. Rachel smiled. I thought you might be. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and share it. It helps the next person find their way here.